Welcome to the Growing Tall Poppies podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Nat Green, and I'm so excited to have you join me as we discuss what it means to navigate your way through post-traumatic growth and not just survive, but to thrive after trauma. Through our podcast, we will explore ways for you to create a life filled with greater purpose, self-awareness, and a deep inner peace. Through integrating the many years of knowledge and professional experience, as well as the wisdom of those who have experienced trauma firsthand, we will combine psychology, accelerated approaches, coaching, and personal experience to assist you to learn, to grow, and to thrive. I hope to empower you to create deeper awareness and understanding and stronger connections with yourself and with others, whilst also paving the way for those who have experienced trauma and adversity to reduce their suffering and become the very best versions of themselves in order to thrive. Thank you so much for joining me on today's episode. I'm super excited today to bring you our next guest on the Growing Tall Poppies podcast. It's my absolute pleasure and privilege to welcome back my beautiful friend and TRE trainer and supervisor, Emmeline, or Em, as we referred to her last time, Em Duncan, who you will recall that we met on episode 16. And if you haven't listened to episode 16, I would highly recommend you go back and do so. And she is so generously offered to come back and further share her experiences and many words of wisdom with us today around narcissistic abuse, relational wounding, and its impact on our nervous systems. So, yeah, welcome, Em. So excited to have you back here again.
Yeah, it's lovely to be back. Lovely to be back.
Amazing. All right. I know that last time when we chatted, you shared some experiences that you've had with intergenerational trauma and a bit around the impact of narcissistic relationships and a tumultuous upbringing on your mental health. So how about we start there with you giving us some perspective on your experience and how it's led to where you are now?
Yeah, thanks, Nat. So there's trauma in both my mother's family and my father's family going back a few generations. And so in their relationship, that was quite a tumultuous relationship and often quite scary for me as a child to witness and be. And I think I thought I just needed to endure that part of my history. And then once I became an adult and I could make my own choices, I believed that my path would be much easier because I'd left that back in time. But I suppose we know from the Adverse Childhood Events Study that trauma lives on in our body and expresses itself through our life and our behaviour on a really unconscious level.
It certainly does.
So I always had a dream of meeting a partner and having a family and having a beautiful home life. My mum is one of 12 children, which just blows my mind.
Oh, my goodness.
My
12
poor grandmother
kids.
being pregnant for a decade. Like that's
Oh, the thought of it.
Woman deserves a medal.
Brave woman.
But so I always had this, this dream and this vision of wanting to have, 3 or 4 kids and having a beautiful family and a beautiful life. But it didn't work out that way for me. And what I didn't know and I really didn't appreciate until I started my TRE journey was that trauma was playing out in my body, and the partners that I picked felt safe to me. Yeah. But what I didn't understand then was they felt familiar to me. So they felt like home because they replicated a lot of the characteristics and qualities of, the people that I'd seen in the past that I grew up with. And what I also understood a little bit further into my TRE journey was we know that in trauma we dissociate from the moment in time and we dissociate from our body. So
Yes.
I wasn't able to trust my gut feelings when something was a bit off. I kind of made it a bit about me and my own insecurities and my own uncertainties and my own kind of nervousness. And I wasn't able to physiologically dig underneath that and get a really true sense of the person in front of me. So I had a whole range of difficult relationship experiences, ranging from dysfunction and managing difficult behaviour in them and sometimes in me. I was pretty dysregulated early
Mm-hmm.
on. And then I had some very narcissistic relationships as well, where there was a lot of intentional hurt that was directed at me.
Mm.
Through my TRE process and clearing those relational traumas from my body, I feel like a different person. And
Mm.
the choices and the way that I sit with people is really different, really different.
Yeah. So if you look back at that and just explain that, how it was and how it is now from that perspective of
Yeah,
how I would have seen you back then versus how I see you now.
yeah. So back then, you would have seen someone who kind of looks like me now. I've always been really hardworking. I've always been a person that wanted to follow her truth and follow her passion, but there was a whole lot of uncertainty and insecurity within me. And I did lots of other kinds of therapies to try to work with that. So I
Mm-hmm.
did talk therapy and dance therapy and breath work and all kinds of beautiful things that kind of made a difference, but it really didn't stick. And
Mm.
I would meet people and I would have a bit of an odd feeling, but I couldn't distinguish between the odd feeling in them and the odd feelings in me.
Yeah. And I think that's a really important point, isn't it? So, like you've indicated that your nervous system was on alert because that's how you'd been through your experience. You were hyper alert, hyper vigilant, and you didn't know how to regulate your own nervous system because you had to be constantly on guard to be safe.
Yeah. And in that fight flight state, I was also internally moving so quickly that I didn't know how to drop into the moment and really get a true sense of what's theirs, what's mine, and how are things actually tracking.
Yeah, so there was that flow on between the two of you, and you were just thinking their stuff was yours, your stuff was theirs, and there
Yeah,
was no separating the two.
yeah. And so the sort of then M and the now M, I would have those signals or those inklings of, oh, maybe something's not right. I didn't have the embodied clarity to know what was mine or what was theirs. And I probably didn't have enough spaciousness or ease or flow in my own nervous system to really get a sense of what was on or what was off. Whereas now I can meet someone and have a very immediate sense of no. If my body says no, I don't need to go to my head and justify it and rationalize
Mm.
it. In the past, I would have that sense of, oh, I'm not sure. But I go into my head and say, well, if I observe this person from an external perspective, things kind of look like they add up. And so I would dismiss my felt sense.
So when
Whereas,
you say you could tune in and work out what it was, what did you get when you recognized that was a no?
it's a gut feeling.
Mm.
So when in my work with people, I say to people, your gut is really clear. It'll tell you three things. It'll be either yes or no, or I don't know yet.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yep.
we need to listen to and follow that. So for some people, it's a really clear yes.
Yep.
For other people that I meet, it's a really clear no. And whenever I hear that really clear no, I don't ever go into my head and try and figure it out. I follow my body now. And if I
Wow.
miss out on engaging with someone that potentially could be okay, I'm okay with that. I'm not taking any more risks.
Yeah, you don't lose sleep over that. You just go,
No.
no, because you've learned through all your practice and years of inner work to actually read your gut really well and know
Yeah.
that that response is the correct response for you.
Yeah.
I
And,
love
that
that.
trust with self isn't it like a light switch that it flicks? It's something that builds over time with
Yes,
time and
definitely.
experience and repetition. Yeah.
So, for people who are listening to this who are still in those early stages, they've come out of trauma and they're not yet fully into post traumatic growth, what would be some strategies or some tips that you could give them to start to tune into that gut?
Yeah. Well, I practice this in my everyday life so that when I meet someone important, I've got that skill and I've got that technique in place. So it's really easy to reach for and it's more autonomic. So if I'm talking with someone at the supermarket, if I'm going to the deli counter and asking for olives, if I am, talking to a person that I meet on my, walks with my dogs, I will always tune into my body and see how comfortable my body is,
Mm-hmm.
and I will follow that.
Okay.
So practicing in the non-important moments so that it shows up in the important moments.
Excellent. So if you were walking your dog and you came across someone walking another dog, for example,
Yes?
and their dog did something that you didn't feel was okay, would that gut response come through the dog as well?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Absolutely.
Yeah. And then you would be looking for, I'm assuming, how that person manages their dog, what they
Yes.
say, what they do, and how that makes you feel.
Yes.
Yeah.
And, when it comes back to those nervous system practices, I think of when I'm relating with people, down the bottom, we've got that social engagement section where things are really easy and comfortable and affable. And then if we notice someone's nervous system is maybe in a bit of fight, flight, kind of high sympathetic activation,
Mm-hmm.
then I aim to use the groundedness in my nervous system to make easy connection, but not too much. So there's actually a person on my walk that I'm thinking of that makes me feel really uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
But instead of allowing my own nervous system to go into defense and kind of be a bit bristly, because we know nervous systems communicate with each other through our felt sense.
Yeah.
So I intentionally use my groundedness to smile and say hello, but I certainly won't be stopping and talking with this person and having a long conversation.
Yes. So that's a very conscious choice. You will be polite and be civil and smile and wave and keep going. Whereas if someone you felt really comfortable with and your nervous system felt you were attuned to each other, you would stop and have a chat potentially.
Yes. And so there's another man that I have met on my walks with my dog, and his name's Roger, and he's so beautiful. And we talk philosophy and life and writing and reading, and our conversations go everywhere. And then he's got to be in his 80s. And I met him on my walk the other day. He was running,
Oh
puts me
my
to
goodness.
shame. I said, come on, Roger, you're inspiring me. Let's run together. I said, but you've got to go easy on me because I'm not as fit as you. And like, if I see him, my body lights up. Like my heart
Uh,
opens, my belly softens, my face smiles. I get like, even just talking about it, I get this beautiful warmth through my body. So our body will tell us whether people are safe and good for us or
yes.
whether there's somebody to be more cautious and mindful around.
I love that. And that is a perfect example. So for our listeners, they can start to connect within themselves and just notice what's happening in their environment with the people they're meeting and start to test it out in situations that aren't, you know,
Crucial.
life
Yeah.
threatening or anything like that, and test it out and start to get that sense. And I know that we talked a bit earlier around why safety in a relationship is important. So now might be a really timely little segue into that around how you check in with yourself and what is important to deal with the emotional wounding.
Yeah. And I always say safety is my love language. Words of affirmation and quality time and all of those beautiful things are wonderful, but safety is my number one. And what I know is that because I didn't grow up in a safe home, I didn't have that felt experience of safety within me. And so I couldn't sense safety in other people.
Of course. Yeah.
And so there's, again, that theme of internal safety and then external safety. How do we sense that? How do we know that? And it wasn't until I had several years of my TRE practice under my belt that I really started to, for the first time, drop into a new layer or a new level of safety. And it continues to expand. The more work I do on myself, the more connected to myself I am, the more connected to my felt sense of safety. And so it gets much, much clearer when I meet different people, whether they are safe and good for me or whether there's somebody to navigate around. And, we know in particular when it comes to narcissistic relationships, there's a lot of intentional hurt that they will direct at people. And, it's actually quite diabolical that people can be so intentionally cruel and create so much upheaval, but they do. And I sit with people that have those experiences all the time.
Yeah.
And because they appear to be calm, I used to think my ex-partner was really assertive. And I thought, wow, I really want to learn how to be assertive like them. And maybe if I spend enough time with them, then I'll learn how to be that. And what I understand now was they weren't calmly assertive, they were calmly aggressive.
Okay. And yeah, having the experience growing up that you did, your radar wasn't working on anything other than that because it's all you knew.
That's it. And I thought anger was either, the two models of anger I sort of saw in my house was simmering rage and explosive outbursts. So because the aggression came out with a different flavour, couldn't even recognise it for what it was.
Yeah. And I think, one of the things that I think is really important that we mention here is that it's really important that we don't blame ourselves in this situation, because you couldn't know what you didn't know. You had no way of learning that. You didn't have a teacher of anything other than what was happening in your own home. And then, like you said, you chose what felt familiar, what felt safe. Better the devil you know, isn't it?
Yep. And, we don't teach our kids to look for the right things in relationships. We kind of expect that to be an implicit learning.
Yeah.
And so for some of us, we do have those really intentional conversations with our kids around what to look for. What are the green flags? What are the orange flags? What are the red flags?
Yes.
And, how to recognize them, not just with our eyes, but with our whole body.
Yeah. So when you have nothing other than orange and red flags, how do you even start recognizing what might be a green flag or understanding that?
And it's interesting because, we were talking a lot in our conversations about that activation side of the curve and then the recovery side of the curve from polyvagal theory, Stephen Porges. He's my nervous system nerd crush.
Exactly.
Norman Zarv is my new one as well.
Yes,
Norman
he's
Zarv
pretty
is my
good
new
too.
one. bit younger. But so my nervous system was really oriented to that activation side of the curve because that's all I had seen modelled. And
Yes.
so red flags and orange flags were really easy for me to see, but I didn't know what to do with them in the other person or in myself. But the green flags, I had absolutely no reference point for. So we often know that when people meet the right person, it's not this giddy, ungrounded, elated experience. When we meet the right person, it's actually calm and easy and can potentially, in our physiology, when we're used to things kind of revving at a high speed, it can almost feel a bit boring,
Yes.
like there's something missing.
Mm-hmm.
So again, TRE, this beautiful practice that we have available to us, helps us orient to that recovery side of the curve, to more safety, to more ease, to more groundedness in ourselves. And so then when we can feel what that's like in ourselves and we meet that in another person, it just feels calm and easy. It just feels good.
Yeah. And I think you've hit the nail on the head that we have to work on it in ourselves first.
Spot
Because
on.
if we don't have that sense of groundedness and can't attune to our own nervous system, then we can't recognize that in others. It's not possible.
Yeah. And I always say, he who is furthest down the curve wins. So if somebody is in fight flight, as narcissists really intentionally do, they intentionally push their targets into freeze. They're so bamboozled and overwhelmed and don't know where up is, where down is. I struggle to make decisions. I struggle to think clearly. Those people are really easy to manipulate, and it doesn't take much to push people back up the curve, just to kind of, bob them back up there. So when we do our own internal regulating and recovery through the nervous system work, and look, my encouragement is for anyone that has been hurt through relational wounding to find a really good therapist, to be able to have that human reparative experience in real time in the room as you're learning to downregulate your nervous system. So we know we get hurt in relationship, but we absolutely heal in relationship too. And it doesn't have to be, you don't need a romantic partner to heal in relationship. It could be a best friend, it could be a beautiful dog, it could be a therapist. So there's so many ways that we access those healthy healing relationships so our physiology can have a different experience.
Yes, I love that. Absolutely love that. So you talked then a little bit about freeze. So we know there's that freeze, fight or flight response. Let's talk a little bit about that. So how can we work with conflict when our nervous system is in that freeze state if we've been pushed up the activation curve?
Yeah, excellent question. So, taking time out is really important. And taking time out not to just distract or cope, but actually taking intentional time out to heal and ground and resource. And so then when we take that time out and we allow our energy to restore itself, when we go back into the conversation and we're further down the curve, we've got a much better chance of finding resolution, particularly with people who want to resolve things with us.
Yes.
So you've probably heard of the Gottmans, who are a wonderful couple that do research on relationships.
Yeah.
And they did this experiment where they would put people fighting in front of a camera and they would then say, okay, go for it. And they'd start their argy-bargy and you did this, no, you did that. So it's like a you fight, which tends to be I'm right, you're wrong. It tends to be the underlying theme of most of these disagreements. And so then what they did was they got the technicians to say, oh, hang on a minute, we've got some technical difficulties. Can you just pause for a minute? So they didn't have technical difficulties. They were actually just creating space and time for their nervous systems to downregulate. And they found that when they did give these people in front of them space and time to just calm down and regulate, they go, okay, everything's fixed now. Go for your lives. then those conversations would be the healing, repairing communications that needed to happen in order to get to a place of resolution. So a lot can be said for taking time out. In our TRE practice, we use that 7 out of 10 effort scale. So if you're going beyond your internal 7 out of 10, if you get to your 8 or your 9, you're really going to lose the plot. Nothing helpful happens at an 8 or a 9 or a 10. But if you are below a 7, at a 7 or below, your hands are still on the steering wheel. You might feel a little bit feisty. You might still feel a little bit hurt, but you've still got your feet on the ground and you're still really present.
Yeah.
Then you're likely to have a really helpful conversation. But if you're flipping your lid, you're never going to solve anything from there.
No. So it's so important that we manage our own nervous systems. And then in turn, as you've said, that can calm other people's nervous systems down. So it's our responsibility to manage ourselves. Yeah.
Yes. And I would also say too, Nat, it's that seesaw dance of I'm going to manage and get really good at regulating my nervous system for you, so you can get really good at managing your nervous system for me, but also too, learning each other's nervous system. Okay, what do you need? If you're feeling, really grumpy and really upset and really overwhelmed at the end of the day, what do I need to do to help navigate your nervous system and help you down-regulate faster? Because really, relationships are a co-regulation dance between two people. If I can help you out, give you some of my groundedness from my nervous system and bring you down the curve, then we're going to have a much more successful relationship than if I'm just, we're blaming each other and we're pushing each other away.
Absolutely. And I think that's really important as well, what you've touched on there, that it's not realistic to think that in a relationship, you're both going to be perfectly well regulated all the time. That's living in fantasy land. Let's be honest. So it's around that communication, but also our nervous systems trusting each other in a relationship, whether that's an intimate relationship or friendship or a workplace relationship. It's around trusting each other because we can regulate our own nervous system.
Absolutely. And, we all have met those people who we just kind of meet and they just feel comfortable and easy and we want to talk to them. And, that's a beautifully grounded nervous system. So if we are able to be that within ourselves, that's probably one of the greatest gifts that we can offer our loved ones and the people around us, instead of having this little bristly back of whiskers that if anyone bumps up against, then we have a go at them. So being able to be in our ease and be in our social engagement state is really the ultimate ideal. But as you say, we are going to go into freeze. We are going to go into fight, flight. Everyone has a bad day. I certainly know that I still have bad days, but a lot less than I used to, thankfully.
Absolutely.
So being able to take care of ourselves is crucial in that.
Yeah, definitely. So what are a couple of tips for our listeners of what they can do to take care of themselves?
Yeah. So what I would say is practice grounding techniques as much as you can. So we often want those grounding techniques to work when we're in crisis, but it's a bit too late by then. It's really hard to reach for them if we haven't programmed them into our system.
Yeah.
So long, slow, deep breathing. There's all kinds of beautiful breathing techniques that we can do. Going for slow walks, really finding ourselves in nature, doing some peripheral visioning exercises. So making sure that we're kind of looking all the way to the left, all the way to the right, all the way up, all the way down, because we know that when we are a bit hot under the collar, our vision goes into a pinpoint focus, a bit like a sharpshooter, and look out if you're in the firing line. So opening up our scope of vision is good. Cold showers, even a cold compress on the face, all of those things can help to regulate us. And really, most importantly, being kind to ourselves. I think we live in such a busy world. there's a lot of push, 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 go, go, go that happens internally. So the more we can practice kindness towards ourselves, the softer we will be in our physiology.
Absolutely. And I think, yeah, that's so important because we can often be kind to others and not so good at being kind to ourselves. But someone like you, when I'm in your presence, there's this beautiful grounded energy and that radiates kindness that makes me want to be kinder and more compassionate to myself. So and that's even through Zoom, never met you in person. So those things are really important, that every person around us, their nervous system impacts us.
Yes.
Whether we like it or not, we are impacted, and we need to just be aware of that so we can work out how to navigate conflict or other groundedness.
Absolutely. And you remind me of a beautiful friend of mine who said to me once, he said, Em, where are you on your list of priorities? And I'm like, oh, probably about a 10. And he said, well, if you move yourself up to number 1, then if you go up 10 places and everyone else just comes down by 1. And I think they can cope with that.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like,
I love that.
oh,
Good
that's
tip.
I know, it was beautiful and it stayed with me. You told me that 20 years ago and it stayed with me till now. It still is a great reminder. And I think we have this sense that to put ourselves in that number 1 position means that we're being selfish, self-interested, egotistical and uninterested in others. But if we are approaching ourselves from a kind, loving, curiously compassionate frame of reference, and we are actually taking care of our needs and taking good care of ourselves, because let's face it, who's with us 24/7? Us.
Exactly.
So
Whether we like it or not, we're there.
exactly, we are there. So then if we are being good to ourselves for those 24/7 timeframes, then it's going to be so much easier for people to be around us. And so being kind to self is probably one of the best gifts we can give to
Oh,
everyone else.
absolutely. Because I think if you don't like yourself, that emanates as well. People
Yeah.
get this negative energy and they're feeling our nervous systems and go, oh, okay, if she doesn't like herself, then I'm not going to waste my time.
Yeah, it's almost like those people have got a bit of a wall. Like, do you feel like
Yes.
they're almost a bit unapproachable? You kind of want to get to know them, but you feel this kind of hard wall. And so you think, oh, well, they aren't interested in me, or I have nothing I can give. And so we keep on moving.
Absolutely. And that's that, your example that you gave at the beginning, the walkers. Roger,
Yes.
who you connect with, and maybe the other walker isn't horrible bristly. Maybe there's a wall there because that might be the only half an hour they get a week to go on their
Yep.
own, to actually prioritize themselves. We never know. We never know what's going on in someone else's life.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's so true.
So I think, though, that you've given some great tips in that. Start with self-kindness. Really focus on putting ourselves at number 1, not number 10. Even if we just do that one day and see how
Yeah.
we go. 1 hour in one day and we start doing it. And it's not about being selfish. It's about, if I can be the best version of myself and be as kind as possible to myself, my nervous system will radiate that and others will want to be around me, and that negative energy isn't there.
Absolutely. There's one like tiny little thing that I do for myself as a little act of kindness. And I don't do it all the time, because if I did it all the time, it wouldn't feel special.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes I will put a tea bag in my cup of tea with a teaspoon in the morning, like I'm making a little cup of tea for myself. And I go to sleep and I forget about it. And I stumble into the kitchen half asleep in the morning. So I switch on the kettle and I see the cup with the tea bag and teaspoon in there. And I go, oh, isn't that nice? And I actually feel that little kind of bubbling up of, oh, isn't that nice? Like, what a lovely thing.
That's
And so
beautiful.
Yeah, it's really simple, but we don't have to have these big ways of going out of our way to be good to ourselves. They can be really simple gestures. And again, like tuning into the body, when I do that, I feel like this little tingle of delight when I see that cup of tea in the morning. So when we can offer those small things again in a repeated way, we actually start to feel cared for and nurtured and like we've got some value. So,
And I think by doing that first, starting with ourselves, we then are in a better place as far as our own healing goes to be able to be ready for another relationship.
yeah.
Yeah. And I know
Absolutely.
we've talked a little, and I want you to go into a bit more detail because I know that's your area of passion now around that emotional wounding and relational wounding.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I think when you've flown around the planet for a few decades,
Couple of decades, yeah.
I'm tipping 5 at the moment, so
5.
I'm getting up there.
Yep.
So when we've flown around the planet for a few decades, we are going to have bumped into somebody at some point in time. As you pointed out before, it could be a colleague, it could be a sibling, it could be ex-partners, it could be anyone, it could be friends. And so when we are able to look at that relational wounding, because when we have an experience of a safe enough relationship in front of us. I was having a chat with a friend this morning, and we were talking about relational wounding, and that when we are first together with a significant partner, we're in the honeymoon phase and everything's wonderful, and we're seeing all of the cute little quirky things that they do, and they're seeing the interesting things that you might be sharing with them. And so everything's beautiful and wonderful. But at some point in time, our nervous systems are going to drop into a deeper layer of safety because we've had that consistency. And when we are feeling safe, that's when our wounds come up. Our nervous system says, oh, good, let's heal this thing. And sometimes often it's triggered by an external circumstance. But we know that we're not moving through it as gracefully as we can because of all of the somatic baggage that's hooked into that experience from old memories. So if we can see this relational wounding as a calling for healing, as a calling for growth, then we can engage with that with a greater level of willingness and a greater level of compassion for the person that's in front of us, and a greater level of compassion for ourselves as well. I like to call triggers information points.
Yes, I do. I love that too.
Yeah. So it really is a calling to healing, and we just need to have a really solid plan with our person as to, well, how do we actually move through these rough patches so that we can actually become truer to ourselves, but also closer in our relational engagement.
Because it would be very easy, I imagine, with such a tumultuous upbringing and then picking relationships that you knew, that were familiar, that were safe, but weren't healthy, to then get to a point once you've done all this amazing work on your own nervous system and your inner work with all your talk therapy, dance therapy, all the things you did, to actually go, hang on, I don't want any relationships.
Yeah. Yep. And look, I have to say that in my dance with other nervous systems, I notice those little ripples of information coming up in my own nervous system.
Yeah.
But I have, because I've worked in this way with myself and with other people for such a long time, I have trust. I have trust that whatever's coming up is something that can be moved through, and that I will always land in a better place on the other side. But, for a long time, I had that experience of every man that I've ever loved has deeply hurt me. And that's a really heavy thing to sit with, and a really hard thing to shift just with cognitive practices alone. I could have said affirmations till I was blue in the face, and my body just never felt like that was right or true.
No, your body
Whereas
would have had
now,
a reaction every single time you're telling yourself, you're saying all the positive things, doing all your cognitive behavior therapy, but then someone's there and you're reading their nervous system and you're going, that's not right.
yeah, it's like, okay, is this calm nervous system that I'm perceiving in front of me, is it calmly aggressive or is it going to be calmly grounding? That was a distinction that I needed to lean into. And again, with a slower moving nervous system, that's also allowed me more space and time to give my relational body a new experience.
Yeah, very important. So just knowing though that once you are in tune with your gut response and your own nervous system, you will still see, you'll be able to see other people's nervous systems that aren't as healthy or aren't as grounded. What happens though if you're around that person for quite some time? You might have been stuck on a plane flight with them and their nervous system's terrible, for example, and you're on there for a few hours. How do you work through that transference from their nervous system to yours?
Yeah. So again, getting grounded in your own body, feeling your bones, feeling that I always talk about that little light that's in all of us, that's that original spark of who we are.
Mm-hmm.
And the layers of pain or the layers of trauma or the layers of dysregulation in others that can kind of leak into us, we forget that we've got that light. So reconnecting back into that true essence of self. And again, Terry, I keep on talking about it, but it's just been such a life-changing experience for me. And what I feel and have found is that every single time I practice, I am returning to a clearer, deeper, more true version of myself. So when I get wobbled off my course by people around me, it becomes a faster and more efficient process to return back to myself. And I've still got big stuff going on in my life. My life is not as uncomplicated as I would love it to be. But isn't that true for so many of
Well, it's
us?
life, though, isn't it? That life is
Yeah.
full of ups and downs, full of good people and not so good people. And we can't protect ourselves from all of it and wrap ourselves in cotton wool.
Yeah. And I think you make an important point there, Nat, because I think we would all like to live a life without trauma or a life without challenge or a life without difficulty. But if we don't have that bumping up against our nervous system, we don't grow. And
Exactly.
when we think about that tall poppy metaphor, which is such a beautiful analogy, it's like if we don't push through whatever we need to push through, not in a resistant kind of feisty fighting way, but if we don't meet whatever percolating inside of us, we're never going to evolve into the person that we can be. There's no way I would be the person today if I hadn't gone through all of the layers of pain and change that I've had to go through to
Yeah.
be where I am today.
So very true. I mean, really, as awful as they are when we're going through them, they're opportunities for growth, as you said, and they make us who we are today with all the good, the bad, the ugly, but all the learnings and the gifts, really. That's the way I think of trauma really is a gift because we get so clear on who we are and
Yeah,
what really matters. And once
yeah,
you've been through really anything, no matter how big or how little it is, things have a way of showing what's important and what you need to focus on, and other things just aren't that important.
yeah. It does. It gives you a huge amount of perspective on the world, and it also gives us a huge perspective on who we are. When you've walked through the fire and survived and can actually find some peace and some ease and some enjoyment on the other side, there's a faith in yourself that can't be taken away by anyone or anything else.
Oh, I love that. So really, the faith that can't be taken away, faith within ourselves, and that light, that
Yeah,
inner light. So those two things, even if there's nothing else that we can tap into, those two things are there within every single person. It's about finding them.
Absolutely. And we might feel like that light and that faith gets covered up by the stuff, but it's always there. It's always there inside of every single person. And I think we can resource from that when times are really dark and times are really tough.
Absolutely. And as you've said, you harp on about TRE, but TRE really has been what saved you.
Yes.
Saved your nervous system. It's absolutely been the thing that's made all the difference for me since coming into your world and learning that, because my reactivity that was there when I was triggered by things, it's just not there in the same way. It's still there at times, of course. There's still those people that get me, but I'm a work in progress. And I think it's just that nice thing to realize that, hang on, I am responsible for me, but I can have boundaries and honor those boundaries within myself. And I can spend time doing the healing that I need rather than thinking, oh, this is never going to get any better.
Yeah. And if we are always waiting for the other person to change, we're going to wait a lifetime.
Yeah, exactly.
So knowing that we've got that ability within us to become more and more regulated. And I always say to people, if you're down that trauma wounding end of the spectrum and things are a bit rough and you keep tremoring, you will move along that trauma transformation spectrum. But when you are out of the fire and things are feeling calm and okay, don't stop tremoring, because we find new layers of growth, we find new layers of spaciousness, we find new layers of creativity and confidence. So life just keeps on getting better.
Yeah, and like you said earlier, it's when things are calm and settled that we practice things even more, because that's where the growth really happens. When our nervous systems are calmer,
yes,
that we can really tune in at a deeper level. Like you said, the layers peel away and we can go to places we've never thought was possible and feel, oh, this actually is a place that I've not recognized within me ever, or for a very long time.
Yeah. And so I was sharing with you over the weekend, my nickname when I was a kid was Mouse.
Yeah.
Because I was little. I'm still not very tall. That's not changed. I was little and I was painfully shy. So I would struggle to ask for a glass of water from an uncle who, is a known person to me, because I was so painfully shy. Now I'm running with Roger. I say hi to Fiona. I know Rusty, because everyone's dog's by their dog's name. Yep. Rusty's dad. I wave to him. Like I'm like this social butterfly, and it's poles apart from where I used to be. So I never would have thought when I was the little mouse that I would be chatting with a beautiful soul like you and being able to share with the world my experiences so that potentially they can have beautiful, uplifting, growing experiences too. It's pretty cool.
Wow, absolutely. And what do you think that little mouse would say to you now?
Squeak, squeak.
You're a funny thing.
Sorry, I had to put a dad joke in there.
Yep.
I think that she would just be surprised at what I've achieved so far.
Yeah, and I love how you said so far. There's always that view that we are always a work in progress and the journey's never over. We just keep going till it is over, obviously, but it doesn't have to be.
And that's what makes it exciting, Nat. I mean, I think that when we have a relationship and that relationship breaks down, it's almost like that whole timeline collapses. And then we've got to reimagine what our life might look like. And if we meet a new person and hope for the best, and then that timeline collapses, it's really easy to lose ourselves. But when we are in charge of our own ship and when we are continually working on and working through, then it doesn't actually matter what floats in or what floats out, or who floats in or who floats out. We're living a happy, fulfilling, evolving, growing, exciting life. And then anyone else who jumps on board, it's just a bonus.
Absolutely. Spot on. Excellent. Well, I'm just mindful we've been chatting for a while. I feel like I could chat to you all day. I love the
Me
energy
too,
and
Nat. Me too.
love talking to you. Is there anything else you wanted to add around the emotional wounding or narcissistic stuff or anything like that you can think of
No,
that I've forgotten?
I would just say, be really good keepers of your own nervous system and be really generous co-regulators of the nervous systems around you.
Very wise words. And I know I'll put everything about where everyone can find you in the show notes again, but I know you and Richmond have got some really cool stuff coming up, a workshop around healing through relational wounding. Is that right? Do you want to share a
Yes.
little bit about that?
So so Richmond he runs TRA Australia here, and his knowledge and wisdom is absolutely exponential, and I have a lot of great respect and admiration for him. And we've been talking about these themes of relational wounding, and so we're running a workshop here in Brisbane on the 22nd of September around healing relational wounding. So there'll be some theoretical presentations, and there will also be a number of experiential exercises, and potentially, if we get enough interest, we might even run it online. So
Excellent.
the link will be on my website. So that's thenurturefoundation.com. And there's also the link on the TRE Australia website
Excellent.
too.
And I'll share it on the show notes as well. So because I know that there's a lot of listeners who are like, oh, what's this TRE stuff? And I've had a lot of people going, hurry up and get qualified in it so we can come and be your guinea pigs. I said, sure.
Oh, you are going to have so much fun with it, Nat. It's just brilliant.
I just know that it's so great at settling nervous systems and getting that deeper level of healing and calm
Yeah.
that you just can't I haven't found that I could get anywhere else, put it that way. Doesn't mean you can't get it
Yes.
anywhere else, but it hasn't worked for me in other places. And this is something that you notice pretty quickly that something has changed and you physically can see the
Yes.
change.
Yes. It's almost too good to be true. Like, it sounds so simple. It's almost too good to be true. But I do find when people practice, it's that 6 month mark of consistent practice that people really feel and notice not just the physical shifts. Like, after a session of TRE, what I love is people walk out the door feeling lighter and freer. Whereas normal therapy, you walk out feeling a bit yuck, like you've been stuck with the Ghostbusters.
Yeah.
Whereas TRE, you feel clearer. So you've got your own physical experience and reference point of, yes, something's changed and it feels good. But then the actual deep changes, they show up after 6 months of practice. And you don't have to see a therapist for 6 months. You don't have to see me or you for 6 months. You can learn the practice with me or you or other
Anyone else?
providers. And then you can have your own personal experience of moving yourself through. And it's just, there's absolutely nothing like it out there as a healing
Yeah,
and regulating modality for the nervous system.
absolutely. And even if you haven't had major trauma, it helps with stress, with anxiety, with anything, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, athletic performance, it helps with that athletic performance because you don't have that
Absolutely.
bracing and holding in your body. It really is applicable across the board.
Well, wasn't there a classic example at the Olympics just last week?
Yes.
You want to share that?
Yes. Well, I haven't been watching much of the Olympics, so I'm not really a sports person. I'm more of a down on the floor shaking TRE person. But we did see that there was some pre-performance shaking in the athletes, and we've seen it in politicians that are about to make speeches. They have this pre-performance shaking that happens, and normally we associate that with a deficit, but now we're starting to link that these tremors that are coming through are actually supporting people to excel at a high level. So that's really exciting. It's
Yeah, it
very
is.
cool.
And I think it just opens up a whole new world. And for people in particular who are coming through trauma and adversity, it's another thing. Look, you've got nothing to lose to give it a go.
Yeah,
And if it's not for you, it's not for you. But I would really highly recommend that you give it a go. And again, I'll put that online course that's free for people to have a look at, to check out, as well as your workshop information on the show notes. People can check it out for themselves.
fabulous, Nat. It is always such a joy to sit with you and chat with you. So thank you so much for the opportunity. I really, really appreciate it.
No worries. Thank you so much. And I'm sure we'll have you on here again with words of wisdom about something else.
Oh, I've got lots to talk about with the nervous system, so I'll be
I
back.
know. I love it. Thank you so much, Em. Talk to you
Thanks,
soon.
Nat.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for joining me in this episode of Growing Tall Poppies. It is my deepest hope that today's episode may have inspired and empowered you to step fully into your post-traumatic growth so that you can have absolute clarity around who you are, what matters the most to you, and to assist you to release your negative emotions and regulate your nervous system so you can fully thrive. New episodes are published every Tuesday, and I hope you'll continue to join us as we explore both the strategies and the personal qualities required to fully live a life of post-traumatic growth and to thrive. So if it feels aligned to you and really resonates, then I invite you to hit subscribe, and it would mean the world to us if you could share this episode with others who you feel may benefit too. You may also find me on Instagram at Growing Tall Poppies and Facebook, Dr. Natalie Green. Remember, every moment is an opportunity to look for the lessons and to learn and increase your ability to live the life you desire and deserve. So for now, stay connected, stay inspired, stand tall like the tall poppy you are, and keep shining your light brightly in the world. Bye for now.